listeners. My name is Clem,
And I'm Zach.
and welcome to episode 2 of Amonkhet Spoilers. In this episode, we'll be covering spoilers from April 5th through April 11th.
So, to anyone out there who hasn't seen our first video, check down in the description. We have a link to our first video that covers the spoilers up to April 4th. So, check that out, and we'll start going with this one.
Well, speaking of April 4th, there was one card that was spoiled after our episode. So we'll start with this last card on April 4th and then jump into the 5th to the 11th. So that card being Floodwaters. It's a sorcery for 4 of anything and 2 blues. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hands and cycling of 2.
So, this card probably won't see play in Standard, but it seems like a reasonable effect, something that you want to do in Limited, especially in the slower blue decks. It gives you options, and bouncing creatures isn't necessarily too powerful in Limited, but in blue it's typically something they like doing, and the extra cycle effect is never bad.
Yeah, I wasn't too impressed when I saw this card. For 6, you get to bounce 2 creatures. Cycling 2 is nice, but to me it seems a little expensive for what you're getting out of it. And I think there are other options that bounce cards to the hands that you can get for cheaper. So.
Yeah, definitely true. Again, probably okay in Limited. I might see like the really slow blue decks taking 1. I would never want to take more than 1.
Yeah, it's no Brawl's expertise, that's for sure.
Definitely not. Alright, so on to our next card. We have the next card in our set of trials. There's going to be 1 trial for each color, and today we should be covering the rest of them. This first one is Trial of Ambition. It's a 2-drop, 1 in a black enchantment, and when Trial of Ambition enters the battlefield, target opponent sacrifices a creature. And then, like the other trials, it has the second effect, which is when a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Ambition to its owner's hand.
For 2, you get opponent sacrifices a creature. I'm not sure about this one exactly. If you're working with a deck with cartouches, I think it's going to be more powerful, having this come in to the battlefield continuously. But, let's say you don't have a cartouche. Essentially, 2 mana for creature removal at your opponent's discretion. Doesn't seem too strong, but like I said, if it's working with cartouches, you can keep bouncing it and playing it. I think it'll be more powerful under those conditions.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if any enchantment decks will be that relevant in Standard, but if they do, the trials and cartouches will be big players. But I don't see any enchantment synergy right now, so I doubt that'll be much of a player. So, because this one seemed like one of the best ones in Standard if you combine it with the cartouches, because constantly being able to make your opponent sacrifice creatures is really powerful. But I don't think you want to be playing any of the cartouches with this card, because the cartouches lend themselves to being aggressive cards. They're giving creature buffs and stuff like that. So you don't exactly want to do that in a heavy removal deck. But maybe in the future, in future sets or future blocks, there might be some sort of enchantment theme. So that could help these cartouches and trials be major players in Standard. But otherwise, they're fine and Limited.
Speaking of cartouches, this next one, Cartouche of Ambition. It's an enchantment or a cartouche for 2 and a black. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Ambition enters the battlefield, you may put a -1/-1 on target creature, and enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. I'm a fan. I feel like you're getting a lot for 3 mana. You get to neg one of their creatures and essentially, buff one of your creatures and give it lifelink. So it seems decent.
Yeah, I agree. Right on point. So our next card is Trial of Solidarity. 2 and a white enchantment. When Trial of Solidarity enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +2/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. And being a trial, it has when a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Solidarity to its owner's hand. I don't like this one in standard right now, just because we have like Always Watching, which seems it's a permanent +1/+1 in vigilance. It doesn't give tokens vigilance, which is relevant in this set because of all the embalm mechanics, but so it might see some French play, but I doubt it. But it seems reasonable and limited.
Yeah, I agree. Pretty decent and limited, constructed. We'll have to just see what shakes out in the next couple of weeks.
Because you do have the exert mechanic, which vigilant is relevant with exert, but I don't think this is strong enough to warrant being played, since it's not a permanent buff.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. Always Watching, same CC, plus it's permanent, so yeah. It's just a matter if you're playing tokens or not, and if there's a better option or a better card that does the same thing as Trial of Solidarity.
Yep. All right, so our next card is Watchers of the Dead. People were pretty excited about this card when it got spoiled. It's an artifact creature cat. Costs 2 colorless, and exile Watchers of the Dead, and each opponent chooses 2 cards in his or her graveyard and exiles the rest. And it's a 2/2 creature. So it's a colorless 2/2, which is pretty good, especially when you consider constructed. And then having the exile graveyard part thrown in just seems really strong. Because I know one of the major complaints for Kaladesh standard, not so much in this standard because of other decks, but in Kaladesh standard, exiling graveyards was something people really wanted to do, and they weren't able to do that. So this card it will be played in sideboards just because it's like the only effect that does, it's the only card that has this effect.
What kind of implications does this card have? Like I know it'll interact well with like Scrap Heats and Delirium, and of course like the Embalm mechanics. But what else are people saying that this card is good for?
Well, I think that hits the major players just because your opponent does get to choose, which is something that Wizards really wanted to hone in on, was that it's not just it doesn't completely destroy him. So while it can technically exile Scrap Heap Scroungers, your opponent does get to choose if they want to keep cards like that. But an interesting mechanic to keep in mind from the Battle for Zendikar block was the processors, which cared about cards that your opponent has exiled. So when they enter, they return a card your opponent has exiled to the graveyard, and then they get bonus effects. So,
good point. Good point. Cool. Yeah, sounds good to me. So, our next card is Trial of Strength. For 2 and a green, you get an enchantment with when Trial of Strength enters the battlefield, create a 4/2 green beast creature token. When a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Strength to its owner's hand.
Well, on the face of it, it's a 3-mana 4/2, which is on par for what you want to do. And then, again, if you can recur it with the cartouches, it'll be pretty great, especially in limited.
Yeah. Seems decent.
It also has the bonus effect of actually working with the trials, or working with the cartouches. Like, it creates a creature which you can then enchant with a cartouche, and none of the other trials do that. So, by itself, it has more synergy because it can enchant itself, even though it's not actually enchanting itself. So you can constantly recur them like that.
That's good. That's a good point. Speaking of working with cartouches, the next one, Cartouche of Strength, for 2 and a green. You get an enchantment or a cartouche. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Strength enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight target creature an opponent controls. And enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has trample.
This is a very green cartouche. Fighting and trample is what green does. And again, the green cartouche has some synergy within itself because you enchant the creature as it enters the battlefield. So if you want to make the creature you enchant fight, it will get +1/+1.
Seems good.
So our next trial is Trial of Zeal. The red one, it is 2 and a red enchantment. When Trial of Zeal enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. And when a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Zeal to its owner's hand.
I don't know. 3 for 3 damage. I almost just want to go with just a shock at this point. 1 for 2 damage, and I don't know. It just, but maybe I'm missing something.
No, I think what you said is reasonable. If someone builds like a mono red really aggro deck that utilizes like the cartouches, particularly the red one, which we'll get to next. Just free 3 damage, especially late game, just 3 damage, play a cartouche, 3 damage. It's not good, but it's not worthless, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, the red cartouche, as I just alluded to, Cartouche of Zeal, is 1 red, enchantment or a cartouche. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Zeal enters the battlefield, target creature can't block this turn. An enchanted creature gets +1/+1 in haste.
I love this card. I think of all the cartouches I've seen so far, it's a favorite of mine. It plays into what red wants to do. I feel pumps it, gives it haste, and also creature your opponent control can't block this turn. So whatever you just played, it's gonna get in depending on the board state. So for the cost of 1, at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's usually the going rate on cards is you pay a red and you give it haste. So this card does more than that, so it just seems really good.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see where it ends up. Definitely a lot of play limited. Constructed, we'll see. It's not bad. I feel like it has a better chance than some of the other cartouches we've seen. Cartouches and trials, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Alright, so our next card, which might play well with the Cartouche of Zeal, is Combat Celebrant. He is a 3-drop, 2 and 1 red, creature human warrior. If Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. And just a reminder, exert creatures do not untap during their next untap step.
I like this. Obviously, it's a little fragile, but I think for the effect, it's pretty good. I just think when you play it, being careful of when you exert it, because also it says untap all other creatures, and so that second combat phase that you get, Combat Celebrant will already be tapped. But depending on what else you have, like this could close the deal, or if you use it wisely, it could close the game.
Mm-hmm. Also, I don't think I mentioned this when I said the card, but it has 4 power and 1 toughness. So that is why Clem said it was fragile, just because 1 toughness is not very strong, especially in a world of walking ballistas and shocks.
Oh. Yeah. So,
But as I said, giving it haste, like with the Cartouche of Zeal, is probably pretty good.
yeah. Seems good.
Mm-hmm. So I know you were excited about this next card, so I'll let you take that one.
You're too kind. So our next one is a Planeswalker, Gideon of the Trials for 1 and 2 white. You get a Gideon Planeswalker that comes in with 3 loyalty with 3 abilities. First ability, +1. Until your next turn, prevent all damage target permanent would deal. The 0 is a typical Gideon ability. Until end of turn, Gideon of the Trial becomes a 4/4 human soldier creature with indestructible that's still a Planeswalker. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. And another 0 ability, you get an emblem with, as long as you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. Man.
Yeah. Any card that says you can't lose the game is probably pretty good, just by itself, but it's 3 mana, so you can get it down early and get the emblem. And if you're playing a control-y deck, you can easily keep the Gideon alive to the point where your opponent can try to kill you, but it won't really work. This type of card would need to be played with some kind of life gain, because they are very weak to just if your Gideon does get removed somehow. Like, you can't flash in another Gideon if you lose your Gideon. So if you're dead and you don't have a Gideon, then you die. Like, there's no really responding to it other than gaining life. But he should be able to buy you a couple extra turns at the least.
Yeah, it's a lot going on with this card. I'll just start with this +1 ability. Being able to essentially, take a creature or take a permanent your opponent controls out of combat is really helpful. Whether that's a Heart of Kiran, whether that's one of their Gideons that they have out in the field.
That is a really good point. I didn't even notice that it said permanent, so you can totally target vehicles and planeswalkers. That's really important.
Yeah. So, and let's see. And then also, like, with the emblem ability, that's really any Gideon. So I think there's a couple of Gideons in Standard right now. Specifically, the most popular one being Ally of Zendikar. How do you think this will interact with Ally of Zendikar? Do you see decks using both? Do you see Gideon of the Trials being used more than Ally of Zendikar, or vice versa? Any predictions?
Yeah, I think they will both be played. I could see, because I don't think you want to play like 4 of this Gideon, because he's not good in multiples like the other one was. Like, if you had 2 Gideons in hand, you could make an emblem with the first one and then pump out creatures. This guy, he doesn't get any better by having extra emblems or anything. So I don't think you might play 4 just because his effect's really strong, but I could see playing definitely 4 Ally of Zendikar and some number of this guy just because they work really well together.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a lot for 3.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Like, he's a 3-drop. Like, that is not insignificant. Like, he's going to be hard to deal with because he starts at 3, so you can't shock it. That's relevant. So you'll have to find some way to remove him, because there's not really any way to do it at instant speed and Standard other than counter spells. So they're going to get the emblem I mean, they get the emblem anyways because they do get to activate an ability, but
That's crazy.
yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Looking forward to this card. So.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on to the next card, I want to take a quick step back at the Combat Celebrant, the one that when it attacks, you can exert it and take an extra combat step. People are already trying to break it in Modern with cards like Kiki Jiki, because you can make extra copies of him, because it untaps all other creatures you control, not all attacking creatures you control. So you can create copies and constantly exert them because you get to take the extra combat step whether or not damage was dealt. Like whether or not you actually got through or anything. Like before blockers are declared, you get an extra combat step and you get to make a token off of Kiki Jiki.
I don't know. This seems good. That is a thing.
So now on to our next card, Painful Lesson. Card kind of similar to Painful Truths from Battle for Zendikar, but it's 2 and 1 black, sorcery. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. Yeah, so like I said, it's similar to Painful Truths, which is a card that's 2 and 1 black, and then you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of colored mana, the different colored number of color types you spent on it. So this card's pretty much just worse than that, except in monocolor decks, but it probably won't see play, is the long story short.
Yeah. Our next card, I feel like may see some play. Cartouche of Knowledge. So for 1 and a blue, you get a Orator Cartouche with enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Knowledge enters the battlefield, draw a card, and enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. Kind of similar to Cartouche of Zeal. I feel like you're getting a lot of value. For 2 mana, you draw a card, creature gets flying, and gets pumped. So.
Yep. Flying should never be discounted. It's always been really strong and limited, especially if you could throw it on a big body. And then paying 2 to draw a card isn't the worst thing you can do either, as you can see with all the cycle effects in this set.
True. Yeah, seems good.
So our next card, one of the new Aftermath cards, is Cut to Ribbons. Its first half cut is 1 and a red sorcery. Cut deals 4 damage to target creature. And then Ribbons is X black sorcery. Aftermath, which, for a reminder, you can cast this spell only from your graveyard. Then you exile it, and then each opponent loses X life. So I was kind of messing around with this card when it came out in like a burn deck with like the Thermo Alchemist, which when you play a spell you get to untap it and then you tap him to deal a damage to each opponent. So I was trying to mess around with like a black-red madness burn deck, which wasn't too great. I'd want to play it against someone, but I mean, having an X spell that each opponent loses X life in a burn deck that you can cast from the graveyard seems really good.
Yeah, I agree. If only Cut was instant speed. Still good, though. Still good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because both halves are relevant in the burn deck that I came up with, because killing creatures isn't bad, and it basically gives you 2 activations for your Thermo Alchemist. So it was neat to mess around with, but it might have some play. We'll see going forward.
Yeah, keep my eye on this card.
Mm-hmm.
Our next one is another split card, Rags to Riches. So Rags is 2 and 2 black for a sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Riches is a 5 and 2 blues sorcery. Each opponent chooses a creature he or she controls. You gain control of those creatures.
So the first half just seems like a worse Yahini's expertise. But the one thing to remember about these Aftermath cards is, though they might be weaker than, say, the normal cards that you'd play, like, they give you card advantage, like, because you do get to have that Aftermath in the graveyard that you can always flash back if you need it. So you can kind of read it like 2 and 2 black, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn, and then draw a Riches card.
Interesting.
Which is kind of on par with Yahini's expertise, because you get to play, I think Yahini's was a 3-drop or less. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, interesting. But I think your point's valid, so.
Yeah, to go on that, though, I don't think Riches is a card you want to draw, to be honest. Like, it's a 7-drop, and you get your opponent's worst creature. I mean, you might be able to force some board states where it's good, but I don't. And it doesn't play well with Rags. Like you're not. I mean, you might kill off their weaker things, so you can't. They won't give you their weaker things, but I don't think it's particularly great.
Yeah. By the time you're that late in the game to cast something of 7, hopefully though your opponent will probably have more than one creature or something that they can just give off to you for fodder. So, yeah.
It does play kind of neat if your opponent has a God card and you blow up their board, and they don't have any creatures but their God, and then you get to take their God. But with the gods we've seen so far, you have to build your deck around them to be good. So.
Yeah. So far.
So far, yes.
Cool. Well, our next card is also a split card. Insult to Injury. Insult for 2 and a red sorcery. Damage can't be prevented this turn. If a sorcery you control would deal damage this turn, it deals double that damage instead. And then Injury, again, 2 generic and a red for sorcery. Aftermath, Injury deals 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. Did this card see any room in the deck you were talking about earlier?
The burn deck?
Yeah.
No. I initially saw it and I was like, yeah, this is an effect I want to play. But the problem in a burn style deck is that you want to spend your mana on the burn spells. So paying 3 for double damage seems really good, but you pay 3 because you're not running a lot of lands in that deck, because you're playing mostly like anything from 1 to 3 drops. So you don't want a lot of lands, so you're not going to have a lot of mana. So you can't play this and play 3 burn spells and kill your opponent. I think it would fit better in creature-based decks, whether it's aggro or mid-range, like a green-red deck, where you can basically pump your team, and because it basically doubles the attack of your team. So I like thinking of it more like that. And then Injury isn't bad, because especially if you use it with Insult, you deal 4 to a creature and then you deal 4 to a player. But again, doing both, like playing both of those in the same turn in a burn deck, you'd have to have 6 mana, and that's asking a lot. And then its effect isn't even really that great. So
That's a good point.
So our next card is Scarab Feast. It is a 1 black instant. Exile up to 3 target creature cards from a single graveyard, and then it also has cycling for 1 black.
Uh, Seems like a decent sideboard card. Cheap, instant speed, so you can respond to any of the things we've talked about earlier, like scrap heap, or they're attacking with something that gives them a benefit of delirium. You can kind of mess with that. Um, so yeah, well, it seems sideboardable.
I'd say it is almost main boardable just because of the cycling aspect. I mean, I wouldn't play it main board, but it's almost that power level. Depending on the meta, like if your entire meta is Delirium, you can totally main deck this card because even if you don't play against a Delirium player, you have the cycle aspect, which makes it really good in the sideboard because if you draw it and your opponents, even if they're playing Delirium, but you really need to draw a card instead of exiling things, you have that option.
True. Yeah, I can see
So
that.
yeah, it just seems like an all around like it is graveyard removal that's fair that um, people will want to play, especially since it's so cheap.
Yeah, one at instant speed. It's pretty good.
hmm Yeah, other instant speed, one black graveyard removal is surgical extraction that people play multiple of in modern. So this card isn't nearly as powerful, but it'll definitely be strong in standard. Because you also have to think about like we mentioned Delirium, so like Liliana, um, when her um, middle ability, she puts cards into the graveyard and then she targets one, and you return it to their hand. You can exile that card so they don't get any effect. And the same goes for the Torrential Gearhulk. When it enters, it targets a spell, which you can then um, exile. They can respond to it and cast a spell, so it's not. Um, I guess yeah, it's not quite as good there. But anything that's sorcery speed, it should be pretty good with.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll
Yeah,
have to look at picking up a couple copies. So.
probably it's a common, so it's not going to cost too much, which is really nice.
Cool.
So
Uh, oh,
go ahead.
our next one is Colossalpede. For 4 and a green, you get a insect creature with power of 5 and toughness of 5. Um, and that's it. Um, pretty, it passes the right at the vanilla test, so 5 for a 5/5. So, it's a bomb in limited, but outside of that, I'm not sure where we'd probably see it.
I wouldn't necessarily say bomb, but it's green decks will play it. So next card, also green, pouncing cheetah, 2 and a green, creature, cat with flash, and it is 3 power and 2 toughness. This guy also seems he's below the bar. He's a 3/2 for 3, but flash isn't irrelevant. It'll be fine
Yep.
in limited.
Am I reading this right? Flash on a green creature?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Normally you see that in blue or basically any other non-green. Yeah. But it makes sense. It's a cheetah. It just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. Ah, I gotcha. I see what you did there, Wizards. Cool. Oh, our next one is a split card, Mouth to Feed. So Mouth is 2 and a green sorcery. Create a 3/3 green hippo. Huh. Hippo creature token. And Feed is 3 and a green sorcery with Aftermath. Draw a card for each creature you control with power 3 or greater.
I think this is one of the aftermath cards that don't seem very great by themselves. I think you don't really want to play either half, but doing both seems um, even if it's not on the same turn. Having access to both abilities seems really good, especially in a green deck, because you play all your spells, you have nothing in hand, but you just have a few creatures, you get to redraw, refill your hand, which seems pretty strong, even for 3 and a green. Like, you wouldn't play that card by itself, but having access to both halves of the card is really important.
Mm. True.
So our next card, another pretty popular one on the interwebs, is As Foretold. It is 2 and a blue. Enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than paying the mana cost for a spell you cast with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. Yeah, this card's going to be really strong. I don't think it's going to be like super busted in standard, but a lot of people are already talking about the implications it has for modern, especially with the suspend cards.
That's a good point. I was just thinking about it. We haven't talked too much. We talked a little bit about like other formats on the show outside of Unlimited and Standard, but it seems like a lot of these cards are like, or at least we're keeping in mind like other formats, whether that's Commander or Modern, or even I've heard some cards as far as Legacy and Vintage, of like having homes for them. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. So, we talked a little bit about this earlier today about like encouraging like a diverse meta with all these cards that are like, oh, like, I do something interesting, build around me. And this definitely seems like one of those cards.
Absolutely. Blue decks, the slow blue decks will definitely want to play it. Because it does say on each turn, so you can cast your counter spell for free on your opponent's turn.
What? Oh, I missed that. What? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow.
And it's also X or less, so it doesn't have the stipulation that Brain in the Jar had, where you had to cast 4X. So even if you get to 7, 8, 9 counters, you still get to cast your counter spells or your Torrential Gearhulk, because it says spell. It doesn't say instant or sorcery. So you can flash in your Torrential Gearhulk on your opponent's turn for free.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So blue got a major buff. The only downside to this is it's really, really slow. Like, you play it on turn 3, and it does pretty much nothing in standard. And then next turn you have it at 1, that doesn't really do too much in control decks. And then maybe next turn, once you get to 2, is when it starts actually being relevant. So it'll take a few turns to dial up. Once it does, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, let's hope I never see this card across the table.
And it gets better in multiples. Because if you have 2 on the field, they're both letting you cast multiple spells for free. So I could see blue decks running 4 of these and not being upset.
Man. Well, moving on to our next card, we have Regal. How do you say this?
I'm going to go with Caracal. I think that's how it's pronounced.
It's better than anything I could have come up with. So, anyway, it's a 3 and 2 white, 3/3 cat creature. Other cats you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. And Regal, I hate
Caracal.
Caracal enters the battlefield. Create 2 1/1 white creature tokens with lifelink.
So I alluded to this in our first video. I didn't think they'd actually do it, but if Cat Tribal is a thing, some of these cards might actually see some reasonable play. And this guy is really strong. He might be standard playable, just because he's a 5 mana and he creates, 7 power and toughness, 4 of which has lifelink. So it could be a thing.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, when it was spoiled, I was like, man, Zach was just talking about this the other day. Like, there it is.
Mhm.
Oh,
I don't know if Cat Tribal will be a thing. People are going to play it. I can pretty much guarantee that some number of people are going to build Cat Tribal decks. Um, Whether or not they're good is yet to see. There is token strategies going on in Standard right now. Well, not this Standard, but Amonkhet Standard. So it could be a thing.
yeah. Um, Next card is Battlefield Scavenger. For 1 and a red, you get a 2/2 Jackal Rogue. You may exert Battlefield Scavenger as it attacks. Whenever you exert a creature, so it doesn't have to just be Battlefield Scavenger, whenever you exert any creature or a creature, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card.
This card seems really great in Exert decks, obviously. But, I think if Exert wasn't already a deck, this guy puts it over the top. He's not a looter, um, but it's the opposite of loot, which I think people are saying is scavenge, but I'm not. I don't remember what people call the opposite of looting, but discarding and drawing. Um, People will play this card if Exert's a thing, and with this card and the other cards we've seen, I'm pretty sure Exert is going to be a strong deck.
Cool. Yeah, seems good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was like, oh, let's see what they're trying to push here. So I'll be curious to see what other exert decks you're doing. So we've seen a couple of decent cards, decent exert ability cards. So we shall see.
Mm-hmm. So our next card, again, another card people are really excited about. Not too flashy, but really strong. Manglehorn, 2 and a green creature beast. He's a 2/2. When he enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact, and artifacts your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped.
Ah, Mardu hate.
And copycat hate, because Saheeli's tokens are artifacts.
Oh, yeah.
So one card by itself counters both of the current top decks in Standard. I mean, that seems pretty nice. Especially, it's a 3 mana 2/2, so it's not. Um, um, it doesn't pass the vanilla test, but it's much better than vanilla.
Yeah. The effects you're getting for sure.
It does die pretty easily to shock and harness lightning, but so the Saheeli decks can deal with it, but its effect is very relevant.
Yeah, very relevant. I'd have to agree.
Also, speaking of dealing 2 damage, our next card, Magma Spray, 1 red, instant. Magma Spray deals 2 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. And I know you just mentioned Mardu hate. This continues the
There it is again.
Mardu hate. Probably targeted at Scrap Heap Scrounger. Because of the exile clause, so I could see it in sideboards.
Yeah. I guess I'll just go ahead and disassemble my standard deck and start something new.
Well, that's the best thing you can do with a new set.
Oh, man. Cool. Well, our next card is another interesting card. Throne of the God Pharaoh. For 2 generic, you get a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. This seems really interesting. I'm not sure what other people are talking about, but I'm thinking about maybe finding a way to slide this into Mardu vehicles, because it's very aggressive. the deck is. For 2, it's not that expensive. And when you tap your creatures to create your vehicles, now you have 2 creatures. So that's just more damage this card can do. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. So I like it.
Yeah, it seems pretty strong. I don't know if aggro decks want to be tapping out. I don't know if aggro decks want to be tapping out on turn 2 to do this, but they probably do just because it's so strong. One synergy that I thought about was the card from, I think it was Eldritch Moon. Thalia's Lancers. When it enters the battlefield, you get to search your deck for a legendary card. And this is a legendary card. So if you do like a white weenie deck, you can search your deck for this card with the other card, which doesn't seem bad.
True. Yeah. It looks interesting.
Absolutely. So next card, another Aftermath card, Failure to Comply. First part is Failure, 1 in a blue, return target spell to its owner's hand. And then Comply, Aftermath, and then choose a card name. Until your next turn, your opponents can't cast spells with the chosen name. So the best case scenario is your opponent plays something big, you return it to their hand, and then next turn you play Comply, making it so they can't play that card.
Yeah. Seems good. Cheap, controlling, which is what blue-white wants to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if I didn't see this card come up again. So.
Yeah, and if you can just get Comply into the graveyard, that's probably not bad. If you know, like if you play it with like the cards that let you look into your opponent's hand, like Transgress the Mind or something, being able to hit their major cards doesn't seem bad. So our next card, Curator of Mysteries, 2 and 2 blue, Creature Sphinx. He's a 4/4, flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, scry 1, and then he himself has cycling for 1 blue. So I think, I don't know that blue has a lot of discarding or cycling that you really want to do. We might be able to put together a cycle deck, especially with the Drake Haven that we talked about in the first video. And scrying 1 is pretty good for free, especially because you get to scry before you draw off of cycling a card. So.
True. Yeah, seems good.
Yeah, and a 4/4 flyer for 4 is pretty good by itself, especially in limited.
Yeah. Oh man, blue and blue is looking more good. As long as there's no like super crazy blue card that's been spoiled recently, I think I'll be good. But if there is, I'm gonna have to consider playing blue. So we'll see.
It'd have to be pretty strong for you to consider it. So.
Well, in another color we have Watchful Naga. For 2 and a green, you get a 2/2 Naga Wizard. You may exert Watchful Naga as it attacks. When you do, draw a card.
I don't like this guy. He's like a 3-mana 2/2s. Because he's basically a 3-mana draw card. Because you play him on turn 3, and turn 4 you have to attack with him and exert with him. And he's probably just going to die in combat. Because he's a 2/2.
Yeah. I'm not a fan. Yeah. Just not a fan.
Yeah. He's not what you want to be doing in green. So our next guy, he's definitely pretty strong. Glory Bound Initiate, 1 and a white. Creature, human warrior, 3/1. You may exert Glory-Bound Initiate as it attacks. If you do, it gets +1/+3 and gains lifelink until end of turn. Again, another really great exert card. He'll be great in limited and in standard, because 2 mana 3/1s aren't the worst thing to do in limited. You can just keep attacking, but then if your opponent ever plays something that can block it, you just turn it into a 4/4 with lifelink.
Yeah. Seems good. I'm going to be interested in following this card, especially if you play a little later in the game and you have Watchful. What is that card? What am I thinking of?
Always watching.
Always watching, yes. You get a consistent 4/4 with lifelink.
It actually turns it into a 5/5 because always watching gives it +1/+1 by itself.
Oh, yeah. 5/5 lifelink for 2.
And you can attack with that on turn 3 because always watching is a 3-drop. So during turn 2, Glory-Bound Initiate into turn 3, always watching, like you're attacking for 5 with lifelink and vigilance on turn 3, which is really good. The one thing to keep in mind with this guy, though, is he's not a very good blocker because he only gets strong on offense. So unlike the other guys where vigilance means they can stay back to block, you're probably not going to block with this guy if he doesn't if you give him vigilance.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's the best blocker.
Yeah. Our next card, Hazoret's Favor, 2 and a red enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have target creature you control get +2/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. If you do, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Have we seen any other favor cards like this? Like this one's Hazoret's Favor. Have we seen like a Kefnet's Favor?
Not to my knowledge.
Nice.
Yeah,
So,
I don't recall.
I'm wondering if this is a unique case just because it's a neat effect to have on red, or if we're going to see a cycle of these. I wouldn't be surprised either way. But as far as the card goes, it seems pretty good in red, really heavy aggro decks that just want to get in as much damage as possible. Maybe even in a token strategy, like if you play this alongside Gideon Ally of Zendikar, you make a 4/2 haste token every turn.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was definitely thinking something with a token theme. Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head.
So next guy, Soulscar Mage, 1 red, creature, human wizard, 1/2, prowess. And then if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a creature an opponent controls, put that many 1/1 counters on that creature instead. So the first thought for many people, what's that one?
Monastery Swift Spear.
Yeah. I knew you liked that one. I knew you know, but it doesn't have haste, but I don't think that's extremely relevant. I mean, it's definitely relevant, but playing either of them on turn 1 pretty much nets you the same creature.
Yeah. Instead of haste, now you get... I feel like you get a more relevant ability here. Being able to put a -1/-1 counter. Yeah, you may not be able to get in, 1 damage when you on turn 1 or whenever you play it, or depending on what you have. But yeah, I like this. I think it'll see play.
Yep, I'm definitely good in red decks. I put him in the burn deck just because it made a whole lot of sense to put him in an aggressive burn deck. And it lets you kill stuff like Gideon that you wouldn't otherwise be able to kill.
Oh.
Because the -1/-1 counters gets around the indestructibility. And I actually don't know how that would work with Gideon, because Gideon prevents damage dealt to him, but this is kind of a replacement effect where if damage would be dealt, put 1/1 counters on it instead. So I actually don't know if you could kill a Gideon with this.
Yeah, if not immediately, definitely eventually. I mean, like if you have this out and they bring in Gideon as a creature, and then you play some type of burn spell, and then eventually, it'll just come in weaker and weaker every turn until it's not even a threat at that point, as far as coming in as a creature.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I'm a fan. So, speaking of being a fan, this next card, I'm really interested in seeing what happens with it. Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons. For a black and a green, you get a 2/2 legendary creature human cleric. Whenever Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons deals combat damage to a player, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. And whenever you put one or more -1/-1 counters on a target creature, create a 1/1 green snake creature token with Death Touch. The first part, like, okay, it's decent. I'm not sure. I'm just putting this in a vacuum. How often you're going to get in with a 2/2 creature? But the next part I really like. With some of the stuff we've seen in green so far this set, I don't think it'll be hard to create 1/1 snake creature tokens with Death Touch. As long as you're not up against your match, as long as you're not matched up against anything with like flying or something, I think this is really good.
Yep, I agree with you. I wish she had Death Touch, because then her first ability could have been extremely relevant, because they either block your Death Touch dude or you get in damage. That would have just made her like really great. So, but I think we'll just have to see on her.
Yeah, the only thing I feel like that, and the only other thing I feel like would make her even better is on her second ability. If the wording was whenever you put one or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, create that many 1/1 green snake creature tokens with Death Touch. But instead it just says create a 1/1 for whenever you put one or more. So then I feel like this card would be really crazy. But pretty decent on its own, so we'll see.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of decent cards, I know you like black, so...
Yep, so Liliana, Death's Majesty, 3 and 2 black. Planeswalker Liliana, she starts at 5 loyalty. And her +1, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, and then put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. -3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And -7, destroy all non-zombie creatures. So, as you said, I'm a fan of her. I could definitely see her fitting into a zombie deck, whether that's standard or EDH or what have you. But I don't know if zombies are strong enough yet. We had a lot of zombies in the Shadows over Innistrad block. So I like her. I want to play her, but I don't know if I will.
Yeah. For 5, it's a little expensive. At least when we're used to 3-drop Lilianas that were pretty decent, so...
To be fair, I think we just got kind of spoiled. We got to kind of deal with all Planeswalkers aren't going to be 3 and 4 drops, a la Gideon. We gotta... She's for a slower... it's kind of weird. She is kind of a slower card. Maybe she's the top end of a zombie deck, because zombies kind of want to be aggressive, but... And having a reanimate on her -3 that she can play immediately, you can get back like an Ulamog in standard.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Good stuff.
All right. Next card seems pretty. I don't even know the word for it. it's really cool. Like, it's a really cool card. Approach of the
Uncanny?
like what?
Uncanny, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. So Approach of the Second Sun, 6 and 1 white, sorcery. If Approach of the Second Sun was cast from your hand, and you've cast another spell named Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach of the Second Sun into its owner library, 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. So lots of 7s on this card. So the synergies that people have been talking about with this card are like Aetherworks Marvel, which you cast it, you cast Approach of the Second Sun, you put it 7th from the bottom, and then next turn you tap your Aetherworks Marvel and look at the top 6, which this card becomes the 6th card, and you cast it again and win.
Wow.
And to clarify here, it doesn't matter if the first copy gets countered or not. Like the first time you cast it doesn't matter if it gets countered or whatnot. You cast it, so the condition is met. So some people have been talking about using Approach of the Second Sun plus like Unsubstantiate or the new Failure card that returns a spell to the hand. So if you can somehow manage to pay 7, then 2 mana, then 7, you win the game.
Yeah, a little expensive, but it definitely like makes me want to like grab some copies and build a deck around it for sure.
Yeah, it's a Brewers card. People will make some fun decks with it. I mean, it's probably just fine as a one of in any white control deck. Because it's just like it's not the worst thing you can be doing. And any card that says win the game is pretty good.
Yeah. Speaking of another thing here with 7, got another 7 for you. Cruel Reality. For 5 and 2 blacks, you get a Aura Curse enchantment. Which I think this is a while since we've seen curses, but enchant player, at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. If the player can't, he or she loses 5 life.
To comment on the curse, there was a creature in Shadows over Innistrad, I think, that when it died, it transformed into a curse. But that was like a one of. But yeah, curses aren't really, haven't really been a thing for a while. So seeing curses are neat. Curses are basically enchant player. Is kind of how it works. But as for the card, this card's pretty bad. Like it's a 7-drop. Like it costs way too much to do anything in standard or even like EDH where games go really long. Like I can't imagine a deck that would want to play this.
Yeah, I want to play it. Just like you said, yeah, I just don't know the impact in that stage of the game, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Next card, also an enchantment, Bounty of the Luxa, 2 green, blue, enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all flood counters from Bounty of the Luxa. If no counters were removed this way, put a flood counter on Bounty of the Luxa and draw a card. Otherwise, add a colorless, a green, and a blue to your mana pool. So the wording's pretty crazy. Basically, on your upkeep, you either draw a card or get 3 mana, based on if it has counters or not.
Wait, beginning of your pre-combat theme
Sorry,
phase?
yeah, it's pre-combat main phase, not upkeep. I'm used to stuff happening on upkeep, but yes. Yeah, the mana wouldn't do you any good in the upkeep, so yeah, pre-combat main phase.
So pre-combat main phase, no counters, get a flood counter, you draw a card for 4. Or if there are, then you add 3 mana, essentially.
Yeah, and get rid of the flood counters. And it doesn't matter how many flood counters you have on it. So if you can somehow cheat more flood counters onto it, you don't get extra mana. It's just 3 mana, period.
That's weird. Makes me think that there's something else in the set that I don't know. There's got to be something else that we have not seen or that hasn't been spoiled yet. Otherwise, what's the you know what I'm saying? Like how the card's worded, remove all flood counters, but you can only get one just looking at itself. So,
Well, it does play with cards like Winding Constrictor. Because Winding Constrictor... No, Winding Constrictor might just be creatures. I think it's just creatures, actually. So yeah, I don't... I mean, there are effects in Magic, like Proliferate, that gives additional counters to things. But to the card, paying 4 mana does nothing when you play it. Next turn, you get a flood counter, you draw a card, and that's it. And then the next turn, you get 3 mana. Like, the card itself is not very good. The flavor is great because it's like a river rising and falling. But the card is not particularly good.
yeah. Speaking of another good card, well, not another good card, but kind of changing gears, the Censor's Deliverance. For 1 and a green, you get an instant that destroys target artifact, or you can cycle it for a green. Feel like this one, kind of the same deal as I think it was the Scarab or Feast of Scarabs, or the other earlier card we looked at. Destroys artifacts, instant speed, relatively cheap, and if you don't need it, you can cycle it for relatively cheap or cheap. So
yeah. So like if you're playing against, I'll pick on Mardu Vehicles again. If you're playing against Mardu Vehicles, you're like you would definitely bring this in because it can kill the vehicles, kill Scrap Heap. But if they get a hand with just like creatures and Gideon, you have something to do with this card, which is reasonable. Like, having options is really strong in Magic.
yeah, guess I'll have to watch out for this card now.
Yeah, if you stick with the Mardu Vehicles, but don't do it, Clem.
We'll see. I think there's a couple of cards that we still have left to go to talk about that may just change my mind.
Yeah. All right, so with that, on to the next card. Angel of Sanctions, 3, 2 white, creature angel, 3/4, flying. When Angel of Sanctions enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Angel of Sanctions leave the battlefield. And then it has Embalm for 5 and a white. So, by itself, it's a 5 mana, 3/4 flyer that exiles a thing, which is pretty. It's good in white decks that are white control-y decks, and then if it dies somehow, you can bring it back for a 6 mana 3/4 flying. I mean, I think this card's good enough to see possibly some standard play if people need. Because it exiles non-land permanents, so Gideon, Vehicles, Saheeli.
True. That's a good point.
I could see it as a... right now it's competing with Avacyn at the 5-drop slot, which Avacyn's more of a creature-based card. I mean, it's not bad in control decks, but I think this card could see some reasonable play in control decks as maybe a 1 of or 2 of.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it'll definitely be a bomb and limited, because I don't think people are going to be able to kill it very easily.
Yeah, seems good. My next one, which is really interesting, I actually have some questions on this one. New Perspectives. For 5 and a blue, you get an enchantment. When New Perspective enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. As long as you have 7 or more cards in your hand, or in hand, you may pay 0 rather than pay cycling costs. Now, does that paying 0 affect just like mana costs, or like discarding costs as well like the discarding part of cycling. Does that also count for this, or is it just like for the mana?
Pay cycling. I mean, the way it's worded, like normally the cost of an effect is to the left of a semicolon, and discard this card is part of the effect, or part of the cost is to the left of the semicolon. So, the way it's worded, I would initially say that that you would not have to discard the card, but that would be broken.
Yeah, I was supposed to say.
So, unless, like, the ruling might be that the cycling cost is the mana, but just based on what I'm reading, you would be able to draw your deck for free, which is busted.
Yeah.
So we'll probably need a ruling on this card, unless it's just an inherent rule that the cycling cost is the mana, or in other cases, the life, or other things. Like anything, like if we look at Dissenter's Deliverance, which has cycling green, like green mana symbol, the cycling cost might just be the cost that's right after cycling. So I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Our next card is Champion of Ronas. For 3 and a green, you get a 3/3 Jackal Warrior. You may exert Champion of Ronas as it attacks. When you do, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Yeah, this card seemed pretty good in big green decks.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh, this is what green wants to do. There's no drawback to the creature coming in, so there's no to return it to the hand at the end of the end step or sacrifice it or anything. It's like, oh, you exerted it and you get whatever's in your hand for free. So, yeah, seems good.
Yep. This is one of the exert cards that doesn't really benefit too much from Vigilance. Like, sure, being able to do this every turn is nice, but it's not as powerful as the other exert Vigilance cards. So you can just play this in a green deck by itself. Like, you don't need to build around the exert mechanic for this card to be insane. Like, it's good enough by itself.
Yeah. Or, drawback doesn't seem as bad if you're attacking with a 3/3 that doesn't untap next turn, but then you play a 5/5 or a 6/6 or whatever's in your hand. It's like, oh, well, that can serve as my blocker, and, like, I'll be good until the next go around. So, yeah, it'll be beneficial to have Vigilance, but, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily, like, it'll be fine without it, like you said.
And, to add on to that, the cards you put in can't be countered. So, if your opponent was holding on to counter spells, they wouldn't be able to stop this from happening unless they kill him before he gets his trigger. But if his trigger triggers, like, you're getting the creature. They might kill that creature, but you will get the creature.
And that's just because, as it just says, you just may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. There's no casting or playing. You just put it.
Correct.
Awesome.
So our next guy, Winged Shepherd, 5 and a white, creature, angel, 3/3, flying vigilance with cycling for a white. I think this guy will be okay in limited. The 6 mana 3/3 flying vigilance isn't great, but being able to cycle it early on is pretty good.
Yeah. Cheap cycling at that, so.
Yeah. But other than that, not too exciting.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
next guy, also not crazy exciting. Nimbleblade Kinra, 1 and a red, creature, Jackal Warrior, 1/3 with prowess. Again, not too much there.
Yeah. It's Jackal theme, but yeah, not much going on.
Yeah, maybe we'll see a Jackal Lord either this set or next set.
All right, 7:49 p.m. on April 11th, 2017. Zach has predicted another Lord. First it was cats, now it's Jackal. Who knows?
All right. Continuing on our, unless you had more to say about him.
Oh no, I was going to cover the next card, but you got it.
All right. Continue on our train of not particularly interesting cards. Supply Caravan, 4 and a white, creature camel, 3/5. When Supply Caravan enters the battlefield, if you control a tapped creature, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. Again, not too exciting. Creates a token. So he'll be fine in limited.
Yeah. Yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to have it come in with the tapped creature, but if you don't, then you're paying 5 for a 3/5.
Yep.
Yeah. So, our next card, which seems pretty interesting. Vizier of Menagari or whatever.
Menagerie.
Say that again.
Menagerie.
Yeah, or so that. So it's 3 and a green for a 3/4 Naga cleric. You may look at the top card of your library. You may do this at any time. Also, you may cast the top card of your library if it's a creature card, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast creature spells.
So this guy is definitely an EDH card. It might see some play in standard just because it's pretty unique. One thing to note with this guy is you don't reveal the top card of your deck, like most of the effects like Courser of Krufix or Oracle of Moldiah. It's just you can look at it. So you get to keep it hidden from your opponent.
Yeah. And in fact, you can do this at any time.
Yeah, so it's not like if you would, like the first time you draw, you can look at it and play it. Like you said, you can play it. You can do it whenever. So main phase 1, main phase 2. If you have a Torrential Gearhulk on the top of your deck, you can flash it in during your opponent's turn. And then spending the big part for, I guess the two big parts for EDH is A, being able to cast the creature, but also being able to pay any color mana, which is not very relevant in like a mono green deck, but if you're in like a 5-color deck, you would definitely play this guy.
Yeah. Speaking of more zombie themes, or zombie support, I should say, our next card is Liliana's Expertise. For 3 and 2 blacks, you get an enchantment. Zombies you control get +1/+1. And when Liliana's Expertise enters the battlefield, create 2 2/2 zombie creature tokens.
Yeah, so this is like not even close to the expertises we just got in Kaladesh block. So I don't know what they did here. But no, the card, like I'm not a fan of the card. Like that's a lot for basically 2 3/3s.
Yeah, so 5 for 2 3/3s and potentially more, maybe.
Yeah, I'd rather play the Liliana Planeswalker from this set. So I'm not. I don't think I'd play it in standard, and I even have a zombie EDH deck, and I wouldn't. I don't think I could slot this in my EDH deck just because there's plenty of other Lord effects for zombies, so I don't need this one.
Yeah. Next card is split card, Never to Return. Never, 1 and 2 blacks for sorcery. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Return, 3 and a black sorcery with Aftermath. Exile target card from a graveyard. Create a 2/2 zombie, 2/2 black zombie creature token.
So the one card that's easy to compare it to is Ruinous Path, which its first half, destroy target creature or planeswalker, its sorcery speed for 1 and 2 black. It's the exact same, but Ruinous Path has Awaken, where you can turn a land into a creature, but you have to pay like 7 total at one time. Whereas this one, you can split up the mana and get you only get a 2/2, but it's I think it's better than Ruinous Path because I think this return effect is probably better than having Awaken.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a creature and you get to exile a card from the graveyard, so that just opens it up as far as being versatile and different options it can give you.
Yep, and options is definitely what you want to do. Definitely, like I said, having options in Magic is pretty strong. Right. Our next guy, another guy I know you were kind of interested in, Honored Hydra, 5 and a green, creature Snake Hydra, 6/6, trample. So that's on par. But then it has Embalm for 3 and a green. So you can bring it back as a 4 mana, 6/6 trample.
Wow. Yeah, already pretty decent right off the bat. Then for 4 mana, you can bring in a 6/6 with trample. Man. Yeah. I don't know. You feel like you're getting so much value from that embalm trigger. So.
Yep. And unfortunately, he's a rare, so you won't see him too much in limited. But if you do, he's probably worth the pick because a 6 mana 6/6 trample, like we've said, is good. And then being able to bring him back is just it's decent in standard, but in limited, effects like this just get much better.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the first time, but we've seen some okay bomb abilities. This is the first time I've seen you pay a little bit, but you feel like you're getting a lot of value for your embalm. The last best embalm card I think we've seen was True Heart Duelist, I think. And this I feel like it's like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, because I think for the most part the embalm costs are more than what they originally cost, and they originally cost like what you would expect a creature to cost, but then the embalm's slightly more. But being able to get extra value is the important part. So this guy being cheaper than what you would pay is why he's so strong.
Speaking of strong, we have our mono white god revealed. Oketra the True. For 3 and a white, you get a 3/6 legendary creature god with double strike and indestructible. Oketra the True cannot attack or block unless you control at least 3 other creatures. And an ability where you can pay 3 and a white, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance.
Yeah, so kind of like a 4 mana 6/6 with indestructible, because a 3/6 with double strike is similar to a 6/6. It is much better with buffing effects, but it's much worse with minus effects, which are relevant in standard because the -1/-1 counters. But so far, I think it's definitely top 3 of the gods we've seen. We've only seen 3, so that was it. But no, it seems pretty good by itself. Like, I think you don't have to build around this guy, unlike the other 2. You can just play this as a 4 mana in any white deck, and it'll probably be good because it'll be good in control, because you can pump out creatures and activate it, and it'll be good in aggro because you'll probably already have creatures. So.
Yeah, I like it. Hopefully I can find a home for it. So, our next card is Censor. For 1 and a blue instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1, and a cycling blue.
So I don't think this card's particularly great just because counter unless its controller pays 1 is not very good. You might get some people, and then late game, it's good early on because you might be able to counter an early card when people are tapping out to play on curve. And then late game you draw it, you can cycle it and get a redraw. So it's not bad, but I don't think it'll see much play.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So next card, an Aftermath split card, Reduce to Rubble. Reduce, 2 and a blue, instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. And then Rubble, 2 and a red, sorcery, with Aftermath. Up to 3 target lands don't untap during their controller's next untap step.
We'll say that again.
Up to 3 target lands don't untap during their controller's next untap step.
Cost of 3, right?
Yes.
I hate to see this card early in the game.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of 3s going on in this spell, which is neat. But yeah, I think this is the new balanced land destruction that Red's going to see at least, because you're not really destroying lands, so it's not super feel bad, but you're still cutting them off. So I think this card might actually see some standard play if there's a red-blue control deck, just because it really slows down your opponent.
Yeah. My only thing with this card, once you have a way to discard it and get Rubble into the graveyard, you're going to have to pay 3 to reduce something to get it into the graveyard, and then another 3. So, maybe this was like turn 4, but I feel like the later you go into the game, the less 3 lands untapping is going to make an impact. That makes sense.
Yeah, very true. And it doesn't let you tap your opponent's lands. They don't untap.
Oh.
So
yeah.
it's not like a super freeze. It just kind of slows them down if they're already tapped. So it is definitely better early on in the game.
Yeah. The next one is Neheb the Worthy. For 1, a black and a red, you get a 2/2 legendary creature, Minotaur Warrior. First strike. Other Minotaurs you control have first strike. And as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, Minotaurs you control get +2/+0. Whenever Neheb the Worthy deals combat damage to a player, each player discards a card.
Yep. So, Minotaur Lord that gives a conditional +2/+0. It always gives them first strike. But we're excited for this because it's a legendary, which means it can be your commander. So I don't know if it'll be particularly good in standard. I mean, a 3-mana 2/2 first strike isn't bad, especially if you go like a very aggro Minotaur style. But EDH, people are going to build some decks around it.
Yeah.
So, next card, Unburden, 1 and 2 black, sorcery. Target player discards 2 cards, and cycling 2.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable summary of the card.
Yeah.
It gets past the downside of the typical discard spells, because late game, your opponent's probably not going to have many cards in hand, so you don't really want to have this card, but being able to cycle it makes it a little better.
Yeah. Speaking of cards, pull from tomorrow for 2 blues, X, instant, draw X cards, and then discard a card. Seems good. Your blue player played on the end of someone's turn. X can be whatever, depending on what stage of the game you're at, and you're only having to discard 1 card at instant speed.
Yep, I think it's pretty good. It doesn't play well with like Torrential Gear Hulk because you can't pick X. Like X would be 0. So
True.
That is a negative, but I think it will see some play. Because Sphinx's Revelation, I mean, sure, it gained life as well, but just being able to instant speed draw a bunch of cards is right up Blue's alley.
Yeah, definitely.
Our next card is another Aftermath card, Heaven to Earth. Heaven, X, and green. Instant. Heaven deals X damage to each creature with flying. And then Earth, X into red sorcery with Aftermath. Earth deals X damage to each creature without flying. So it hits all the flyers, then it hits all the non-flyers.
Yeah, it's decent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there's really annoying flying deck in Standard, like if spirits are a thing again, like I
Or
could,
Drakes.
or what?
Drakes.
Yeah, or Drakes, or if vehicles decide to go all flyers, then this card's probably a good sideboard card against it, even if you don't get the second half. So just being able to instant speed hit all the creatures, hit all flying creatures is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. The next one is Pyramid of the Pantheon for one artifact. 2 and tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Put a brick counter on Pyramid of the Pantheon. And tap. Add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Pyramid of the Pantheon.
So you get negative mana on the first few activations, and then you start getting a whole lot of mana. So I think this card's... I actually don't know how I feel about this card.
Yeah, for me, interesting would be the word. Not bad, not good, just interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Like, if you can get the counters, like we were talking about the As Foretold and the Bounty of the Luxif, like there's a way for us to get extra counters on things. This card might be pretty good. We might see like Proliferate or something in the next couple sets, which would make cards like this really good. So I don't think it's good right now, just because it sets you behind a whole lot. Maybe in like a control deck where you can leave your mana open, and then if you don't spend your mana, you get this 2 mana to put a brick counter on something.
Speaking of putting counters on stuff, Quarry Hauler. So next card for 3 and a green, you get a 4/3 creature camel. When Quarry Hauler enters the battlefield, for each kind of counter on target permanent, put another counter of that kind on it, or remove one from it.
So I think he's like too expensive to be very good in Standard, but he's the type of effect you wouldn't mind having in Standard, like being able to plus up your planeswalkers or minus your opponent's planeswalkers, or add -1 counters to your opponent's creatures. Like I think it's an effect you want, but I don't think it's strong enough.
Yeah.
But this next guy is a guy I'm really excited about. Doomed Dissenter. 1 in a black, creature human. When Doomed Dissenter dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, and he's a 1/1. So my first thought was obviously Aristocrats.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can put an Aristocrats deck together, and this guy seems pretty reasonable for it. We just need some good sacrifice outlets, and right now we don't have any good ones. But I have some faith in the Black God. I could see the Black God maybe being a sacrifice-based god. I would really like to see that.
What about the -1/-1 counters in the set? Like, oh, you play him, then you play something where you have to give your creatures -1. Okay, I'll just put on Doom to Center, get a 2/2. But then I guess bringing it back would be a problem.
Yeah, I mean that. I didn't think about the -1/-1 counters just because my first thought with cards like this are aristocrats. But yeah, I mean if you play it with your crocodile,
Yeah.
then like you kill him, you get a zombie, and you get to a full attack crocodile. So yeah, the black-green -1/-1 counter deck is probably pretty reasonable.
We shall see.
So next card, a continuation on the white version from earlier that gained life. There's a one for each color. Vizier of Tumbling Sands, 2 and a blue, creature, human cleric, 1/3, untap another target permanent, cycling 1 and a blue, and when you cycle Vizier of Tumbling Sands, untap target permanent. So this set of cards has an additional effect. It has an additional effect when you cycle a creature, but it also has a normal effect.
Yeah, definitely some implications here. Crazy stuff you can do, for sure.
Yeah, maybe not necessarily in standard, but I mean it does play well with Exert, even though blue isn't in the Exert colors,
Yeah.
which seem to be white and red, and there was a green one, but I haven't seen any blue. I don't remember any blue ones. But
Yeah.
but I think I think it's a fine card in limited, as probably all of these cards will be probably fine in limited.
Next one, Cryptic Serpent. For 5 and 2 blues, you get a 6/5 creature serpent. Cryptic Serpent costs 1 less for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Huh.
So this card's very similar to Bedlam Reveler. It doesn't have any of the bonus effects that Bedlam Reveler had, but he's a big guy that costs less for instants and sorceries. So you might be able to make an interesting deck there, especially if you use like the emerge creatures that. So you play this guy really cheap, and then you can get in some damage, and then you can sacrifice it off to play your emerge creature. So it's probably not the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Next one, Deem Worthy. For 4 and a red, you get an instant. Deem Worthy deals 7 damage to target creature, cycling of 3 and a red. When you cycle Deem Worthy, you may have it deal 2 damage to target creature.
So, as I mentioned earlier, it'll be fine and limited, but it's not too flashy.
Yeah. I agree.
So, next one in this set, Sheffit Monitor, 5 and a green, creature lizard 6/5, so a 6-mana 6/5, and then cycling for 3 and a green. And when you cycle Sheffit Monitor, you may search your library for a basic land card or a desert card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So the big thing to note here is that desert card, which we will get to in a few cards, but that's a thing to highlight here.
Yeah. 6 for 6/5. Cycling, a little expensive. It all depends on this desert card that we'll see and how big of an impact or worthwhile it makes it to include cards like Sheffin Monitor.
Mm-hmm. And again, he'll be fine and limited. Plus, when you cycle, you get the basic and you put it onto the battlefield, not tapped. So, I mean, it's a 4-mana cycling, but it's more like a 3-mana cycling. You can look at it
bad.
that way.
Plus, you get to thin out your deck a little bit. Yeah. Huh.
So this is probably the best of them. But again, it's still not insane, but it's very good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Next card, Stir the Sands. For 4 and 2 black, you get a sorcery. Create 3 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and cycling for 3 and a black. When you cycle Stir the Sands, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So here we're kind of seeing zombies pushed again. What are your thoughts?
So 6 mana for 3 2/2s. Again, not standard playable, but reasonable and modern. Or not modern. Definitely not modern. Limited. And then cycling, again, a way to look at it is it's a 4 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So I think that's reasonable. And if you're watching the video, or in Clem, the bug thing in the background of this card is hilarious.
Wow, let me have a look. What is... I did not catch that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I saw that in a comment and about that someone else made about this card. I was like, that bug is very silly looking, but I love
it. Interesting. Good catch.
So continuing on the zombie path, which
we called it.
Yeah, we got a few here to talk about. Lord of the Accursed, 2 and a black, creature zombie 2/3, and go figure, Lord of the Accursed is a zombie lord that says other zombies you control get +1/+1. Then you pay 1 and a black and tap him. All zombies gain menace until end of turn.
Feel like playing zombies now?
Again, I mean, this is another maybe. I mean, his effect is really strong, but I don't necessarily like zombies because they make a bunch of zombie tokens and can attack. Like, I'm not a fan of turning things sideways as much. I prefer, like, in my EDH deck, it's all about sacrificing my zombies and making other people sacrifice stuff. So that's more the effect I'm looking for with the zombies. And we have a similar card with Relentless Dead from Shadows over Innistrad, where if he dies, you get to bring him back to your hand and you get to bring zombies back. So that's the type of effect I'm looking for with the zombies. And there's a card up here that we'll talk about in a second that does play kind of well with that. So, but this card, if I do go straight zombies, he would definitely fit because Menace is a very relevant ability, especially going wide with tokens.
Yeah, sure. Our next one, continuing on with the zombie theme, is Plague Belcher. For 2 and a black, you get a 5/4 creature zombie beast with Menace. When Plague Belcher enters the battlefield, put 2 -1/-1 counters for target creature you control. Whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life.
So this is more along the lines of the type of zombie card I was interested in. Still not enough to push me over the edge because the major thing here is that we need a good sacrifice outlet. And right now we just don't have a good way to sacrifice your creatures. Again, I still have a lot of faith in Bontu, the Black God, so we'll have to see. But this card, like a 3 mana 3, what is it? Yeah, a 3 mana 3/2 with Menace by itself. If you put the -1/-1 counters on himself and having the effect where your opponent loses life is very relevant, especially in Aristocrat style of deck.
True. Is it me or does his face look a little weird like that other insect?
Yeah, this one's pretty silly looking as well. He's got like some weird tusk things and like a minotaur head. Like I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Plus he's like spitting out toxic gas.
Yeah.
And
My
then,
next card is a Sun-Scorched Desert. It is a land with a subtype of desert. When Sun-Scorched Desert enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player. And you can tap it, add a colorless to your mana pool.
so this card is the desert that we mentioned earlier, with a subtype of desert, like it's a land subtype desert. That implies that there will be more desert cards.
Yeah.
So this effect is not great as a one-time effect, but it's searchable with the Sheffet monitor and maybe some other cards that we've yet to see. But an interesting synergy is playing it with Kefnet, who returns lands to your hand.
Oh.
So it's not a great synergy, but being able to return lands and basically deal your opponent 1 every turn is pretty good. Well, it's not pretty good, but it's not something to overlook.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Next one, Grimstrider. For 3 and a black, you get a 6/6 creature horror with Grimstrider gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand.
Yep, so he's not, like, he's probably fine if a Hellbent style deck shows up. And Hellbent, for those who don't know, is when you have 0 cards in hand. That's a key word in Magic. But so if you're looking for a discard style deck, a 4 mana 6/6 is reasonable. Maybe not in standard, but like we might be able to pull it off in limited.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
Our next card is Anointed Procession. So 3 and a white enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead.
Woo!
So it's pretty much a copy of Parallel Lives, for those who are familiar with that in EDH, but it's in white. So people will definitely play this card in EDH. And then some obvious synergies in Standard would be like the zombie tokens or the embalm tokens that you get. But an interesting thing I thought about not too long ago was it doubles clue tokens as well, if you make clue tokens, which can be relevant because there are some white clue token generators.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, well, you got some ideas with this card. But we'll see what the rest of the set shows before I start suggesting anything.
Next guy, again, another guy I'm sure you're pretty excited about. The Green God, Ronus the Indomitable. 2 and a green for a 5/5 legendary creature god. He has Death Touch and Indestructible. And then Ronus the Indomitable can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. And then you pay 2 and a green. Another target creature you control gains +2/+0 and trample until end of turn. So, what do you think with this guy?
At least of all the gods we've seen so far, I feel like this will be the easiest one to turn on, based on like its converted mana cost. So turn 3, you play a 5/5, and assuming like on turn 1, green's already like big on playing like big creatures, so you can get a big creature, or relatively big creature, and then use the ability to pump up one of your green creatures, and I feel like it'll turn on relatively easy, and you'll be able to attack with it on turn 3. Plus, Indestructible Death Touch on turn 3 or whenever, it's pretty decent. So I'm fairly impressed with this card.
Yep. I think he's not, like you said, not too difficult to turn on, which is pretty relevant. Again, you don't really have to build around him. I mean, you have to play a creature deck, which I think Green wants to do anyways. So, I think he'll be fine. I think he's not one of the cards, like I said, that you need to build around. So he'll probably find his way into more decks than say the red one.
So our next one is Nissa, Steward of Elements. Pretty excited about this one. So for blue, green, and an X, you get a Nissa Planeswalker that comes in with X loyalty counters, which is the first time we've seen X in a Planeswalker before, I believe, or first time I've seen it.
Correct.
3 abilities. So first one, +2, scry 2. 0, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card or a creature card with converted mana costs less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, Steward of Elements, you may put that card onto the battlefield. And then -6 ability, untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands.
So, she, I'll just let you talk because you're the one that was really excited about this one, so I'll let you do it justice.
Oh, yeah. Again, first time we've seen something with X. I think it has a lot of versatility as far as like when you want to play it. So if you need to play it early game to build up your board state with the 0, or to depending on what you're running, Scry 2 is more important to you. Or, if you draw this card late game, where you have a lot of lands and mana available, you can make it a pretty huge threat. And her -6 ability can pretty much, for the most part, close out the game if you're playing her late enough. 10/10 haste in the air coming at you. That's a significant threat. And then if you want to just kind of keep her around, the 0 ability isn't bad. Again, make sure I'm reading this right. Yeah, it doesn't say cast or play. You just may put that card onto the battlefield, lands and creatures included. So I'm a really big fan of this card. Not a fan of blue, but who knows? One of the things I'm seeing in this set is a lot of counters, and you being able to do stuff based on the number of counters on it. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the cards. I like it. Maybe enough to want to go into blue or splash blue. Who knows?
Yeah, pretty much any card that has blue that you're interested in has got to be pretty strong and pretty interesting. Even just playing her on turn 3 as a 1 loyalty Planeswalker and being able to plus it up to 3 and scry 2 seems really strong. And her plus ability plays well with her 0 ability because you can put the card you want second, so then you can play it for free next turn, in theory.
That's a good point. That works.
And then unless you have anything else to say about her.
No, she seems awesome. Other than the fact that I'm surprised we got another Planeswalker. I think for the past couple of blocks, or at least sets, we've only seen 2 traditionally, and now we see a third. Kind of makes me wonder if the rest of the Gatewatch is going to pop up, because at least in the story right now, you can kind of see basically Gideon's impressed, just based on his background. He's impressed with the nature of gods among people theme. But then you've got Liliana, who I haven't been in the lore too much, but she obviously has some type of history here. So that's going on. But then, all of a sudden we see Nissa. You're like, oh, well, we haven't really harped too much of her on the story as far as her relevance to the theme. So it makes me wonder if we're going to see other Planeswalkers, other members of the Gatewatch at least, in this set. So I was surprised to see her.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Who knows? We might see the other 2. I don't know if Chandra and Jace have anything to do with this. We didn't think Nissa did, but here she is. So
yeah,
we'll have to see.
True.
So our last card for tonight is Dread Wanderer. He's 1 black, creature, zombie, jackal, 2 and a 1. Dread Wanderer enters the battlefield tapped, and then he has the ability pay 2 and a black, return Dread Wanderer from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery, and only if you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. So this guy, again, lends himself to an aristocrat style deck where you're sacrificing creatures and bringing them back type deal. I think he's too slow to do it. He might be, like, if you make like a slower deck, but his effects relevant. We've had similar effects like this before, where you can bring the 1 mana zombie back from the graveyard pretty cheaply. So I think he'll find a spot in zombie decks.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if I want to play him, but we'll have to see what else was released, because he does get better with Lord cards and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anything else to say? Any last thoughts or anything?
Set continues to surprise me. If I'm not mistaken, at this point, we're only 136-ish out of 269 spoilers. So a little over halfway. So, yeah, it's crazy. Granted, we've seen a lot of rares, but it's a big set, so, and a couple of mythics. So we'll see where the things take us. But I don't know. I feel like things are being shaken up here. I feel like Wizards is taking a new direction. You've got the invocations, which, as far as design perspective, are relatively like new. You've got Nissa, with the Exner cost for a Planeswalker. I feel like that's new. So yeah.
Yeah, I really like to see them trying new things, because some complaints have been that, this game's been going on for like 20 plus years, so eventually they're going to run out of ideas. So I like to see when they try new things. Sometimes it doesn't work and people complain, but then sometimes it works and then people will still find something to complain about. So I like what they're doing. It's cool to see a lot of interesting effects and stuff, and even some returning effects, because especially interesting effects like Cycle that give you options.
Yeah. I'm curious, but we'll see.
Yeah. So with that, we will end this episode. We'll probably have one more episode before, because we'll probably have everything spoiled by next week, because next week's the pre-release, at least next weekend. Hopefully your store will run some pre-releases. I'll definitely try to make it out to one. So hopefully we'll have all the spoilers by next week so we can review them. Otherwise, we'll keep you guys posted on our thoughts. And then we'll probably do a wrap-up video once, as a separate video once all the spoilers are announced, to give our overall thoughts of the sets and maybe talk about some deck ideas.
Yeah.
So,
can't wait.
Yeah, seems exciting. So with that, good night, everyone.
Night.